بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, ومنها اللحن في القرآن بما يخل بالمعنى. And amongst the sins of the tongue is blundering in the Qur'an in a way that corrupts the meaning, أو الإعراب, or in a way that corrupts the syntax. وإن لم يخل بالمعنى, even if it doesn't corrupt the meaning when corrupting the syntax. الشرح, the explanation, is that من معاصي اللسان اللحن في قراءة القرآن, amongst the sins of the tongue is blundering in the recitation of the Qur'an. وَلَوْ كَانَ لَا يُخِلُّ بِالْمَعْنَى, even if this blunder does not corrupt the meaning. وَلَمْ يُغَيِّرْهُ, and did not change the meaning. لَكِنْ تَعَمَّدَهُ, but he did it on purpose. كَالَّذِي يَقُولُ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ كالذي يقول الحمد لله بضم اللام بدل كسرها, like for someone to say alhamdulillah with a dhamma on the lam instead of a kasra. So it means he says alhamdulillah. It's hard for me to say that. Alhamdulillah or alhamdulillah. فإن هذا لا يغير المعنى. Indeed, this does not change the meaning, لكن haram, but it's forbidden. ويشاركه في الإثم المستمع إن قدر على رده, and sharing with him in the sin is the listener if he's able to correct him.
فإن لم يقدر منعه من القراءة, and if he were unable, he stops him from reciting.
فإنه يجب تصحيح القراءة إلى الحد الذي يسلم فيه من تغيير الإعراب والحرف.
For indeed, it is obligatory to correct the recitation,
to the extent that he is clear of changing the syntax and changing the letters. ومن قطع الكلمة بعضها عن بعض, and to the extent that he's clear of cutting off the word, severing the word, breaking the word. Subhanallah, there was someone I had to correct yesterday. I forgot. Allah will for me to forget. I registered in my mind, said in my mind, after I finish saying these words, I'm going to correct this person. But then I forgot. Subhanallah. وجوبا عينيا بالنسبة للفاتحة ووجوبا كفائيا بالنسبة لغيرها. That's a personal obligation concerning the Fatiha and a communal obligation considering in reference to other than Fatiha. فيجب صرف جميع الوقت الذي يمكنه لتحصيل تصحيح الفاتحة. Then it will be obligatory for a person to spend all of his time that he's able to achieve correcting the Fatiha. Very important. جميع الوقت, صرف جميع الوقت, spending all of the time. So it means, as long as your Fatiha is not valid, then don't be playing video games and doing other things. فإن قصر عصى, and if the person falls short, he will be disobedient. That means sinful. ولزمه القضاء لصلوات المدة التي أمكنه التعلم فيها فلم يتعلم. And it would be obligatory, it's binding on a person to make up all of the prayers during the time when he was able to learn but did not learn. So this means a person who doesn't know the Fatiha has scenarios. uh, either he was able to learn or he was not able to learn. Why would he not be able to learn? He would not be able to learn because he just embraced Islam, for example, and the time before the prayer going out is not enough time for him to learn. Or he embraced Islam recently and he's slow. I mean, dim-witted. So he's unable to learn faster. So he's unable. He has to learn at his own pace. Or he's not a new Muslim, but he has no access to teachers. Like he's incarcerated. Or he grew up in some prairie or upon some mountaintop far from scholars and people of knowledge. So in all these cases, the person was not able to learn. Now I'm doubting about the one who grew up far. Is he not obligated to travel so he can learn? Let me check that one. The one who grew up in a prairie far or some mountaintop far from learned men and women. But the incarcerated one, yes, for sure, because he's unable to get access to a teacher. Then this person has not fallen short. This basically is the point at the end of the day. These people that I told you here have not fallen short. As for that one who grew up on a prairie somewhere, he's obligated to travel to learn if he has to. So since he didn't fall short, then he will not be obligated to make up his prayers that he prayed with this invalid Fatiha, because he wasn't able and he didn't fall short. So who's the one who's going to have to make up his prayers? The one who was able to learn. أمكنه تعلم. He was able to learn. ولم يتعلم. And he did not learn. Then he's negligent. And this one, he's going to have to make up all the prayers that he prayed with an invalid recitation during his time of negligence, during the time of negligence. So what if he were a new Muslim? So as a new Muslim, there's a time before he's negligent. This is relative because he might be slow or he might be genius. So it's relative, this one. What's his aptitude? His ability to learn Al-Fatiha, then he has to take advantage of that or work according to that. If he doesn't, then he's going to eventually get into a time of negligence. Once he gets into the time of negligence, then all the prayers that he prayed in the time of negligence, he'll have to make them up. وَأَمَّا اللَّحْنُ الَّذِي يُغَيِّرُ الْمَعْنَى. And as for the blunder that alters the meaning, فَهُوَ كَالَّذِي يَقْرَأُ أَنْعَمْتُ بِالضَّمِّ بَدَلَ أَنْعَمْتُ. That's like the one who recites أَنْعَمْتُ instead of أَنْعَمْتَ, because then it means the path of those whom I have bestowed upon, instead of the path of those whom you, O Allah, have bestowed upon. وَكَالَّذِي يَقُولُ أَنَّ اللَّهَ بَرِيءٌ مِّنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ وَرَسُولِهِ. And like for someone to recite these words that I just read now. بِجَرِّ رَسُولِهِ فإن هذا يفسد المعنى لأن معناه أن الله بريء من المشركين ومن الرسول. Because the meaning of reciting that sentence in this way is Allah has nothing to do with the pagans or his messenger. فمن قرأها بالجر مع فهم المعنى فقد كفر. If someone recited this like that while comprehending the meaning, he blasphemed. إلا من قرأ بالرواية الشاذة, except if someone recited the anomalous recitation. وهي الجر على وجه القسم أي وأقسم برسوله. According to that, then the the way to explain وَرَسُولِهِ is that it's a swear. And then the meaning would be أَنَّ اللَّهَ بَرِيءٌ مِّنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Allah has nothing to do with the pagans. وَرَسُولِهِ, I swear by his messenger. فَإِنَّهُ لَا يَكْفُرُ. In this case, the person would not blaspheme if this is if he recited it under this guise. لكن لا تجوز القراءة بها, but it's not permissible to recite it. We're just saying if he were to recite it under this guise, he doesn't blaspheme, but it's not permissible to recite it this way. According to Ahmed, it's haram to swear by other than Allah. Who's this وَرَسُولِهِ? Anyway, it's not permissible to recite this way. أما القراءة الصحيحة فهي بضم لام رسول. As for the correct recitation, it's by putting a dhamma on the lam of Rasul. أن الله بريء من المشركين ورسوله. Allah has nothing to do with the pagans, nor his messenger. Nor does his messenger have anything to do with them. فيكون المعنى أن الرسول أيضا بريء من المشركين. So then the meaning would be that the messenger is also innocent of the pagans. قال العلماء, the scholars said, القراءة سنة متبعة. The recitation of the Qur'an is a followed sunnah. فلا يجوز للمرء أن يتفنن فيها. So it's not permissible for a person to improvise in it. بزيادة حرف أو تغيير حرف, by adding a letter or altering a letter. ولو أتى بالمعنى الذي يوافق معنى الآية, even if the result of his improvisation or improvising or his improvisation has the same meaning, has the meaning that agrees with the ayah. أما حديث الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم, as for the hadith of the messenger, فيجوز روايته بالمعنى, it is permissible to narrate it by meaning. وهذا أمر شائع بين المسلمين حتى الصحابة. This is a widespread matter amongst the Muslims. حتى الصحابة ما كانوا ملتزمين أن يرووا حديث رسول الله باللفظ. Even the companions were not bound to narrate the hadith of the Messenger of Allah verbatim. الذي خرج من فمه, according to the very expression that came out of his mouth. بل كانوا يستجيزون أن يرووا بالمعنى. Rather, they deemed it lawful to narrate the hadiths by meaning. إنما الضرر هو تغيير المعنى, and the meaning, the harm here would be in altering the meaning. وعلى هذا كان أكثر المحدثين. And what we have mentioned here is the position of most of the hadith scholars. ومن هنا منشأ رواية الحديث بعدة ألفاظ. This is the source of narrating the hadiths with numerous expressions. أما القرآن أنزل لتحدي المعارضين. But as for the Quran, it was revealed to challenge the opponents. أي لإعجاز الكفار أي لإعجاز الكفار الذين كانوا يكذبون رسول الله, meaning for crippling the disbelievers who were contradicting the messenger of Allah. فلم يستطيعوا أن يأتوا بمثله, and thus they were unable to produce anything of the Quran's caliber. ولا بمثل سورة منه, not even something as much as one surah of the Quran. مع أنه كان عصرا بلغت فيه البلاغة والفصاحة القمة, although this was the age in which eloquence reached its peak. فمع أن القرآن أنزل بلسان عربي, so since the Quran was revealed in an Arabic tongue, لا يجوز تلاوته بحسب المعنى, it is not permissible to recite it. It is not permissible to do a recital of it by meaning. مع ترك اللفظ المتلقى عن رسول الله, by meaning while abandoning the phrases that were taken from the messenger of God. أما إذا كان الشخص لا يحفظ الآية. Now as for if a person did not memorize an ayah that he wants to cite, فقال ورد في القرآن ما معناه كذا وكذا, and so he said, there came in the Quran that which means this and that, فهذا جائز. This is permissible. ولا نقول قال الله تعالى كذا وكذا ثم نورد ألفاظا ليست من ألفاظ القرآن. And we don't say Allah said such and such, and then we produce phrases that are not the phrases of the Quran. Yes. Here's a footnote, important footnote. What we just said is when a person wants مع إرادة أن هذا هو اللفظ المنزل. When a person says Allah said, and then he says phrases that didn't come from the messenger of Allah, and he meant this is the revealed Quran, which is written in the Mushafs, that's not permissible. And some people do that. They say Allah said, and then they'll bring you something in English. Or if they were reading a translation, and if you were to ask them, what are you reading? They'd say the Quran. Or they might say, which Quran do you use? They mean which translation. أما إن أورد ألفاظا ليست من ألفاظ القرآن. As for if a person produced some wording that's not the wording of the Quran, but it means what is in the Quran, and he said Allah Ta'ala said, and then he produced some words that mean what the ayah means, and he did not mean that these are the very words that were revealed and that are written in the Mus'haf. Yajuz, it's permissible. It's permissible. So that's very important, because somebody's going to give you a hard time here. Like when we produce documents and literature, there's someone who's going to insist always that you say which means. If you don't say which means, they won't accept. For me, a lot of times I don't say which means. I think it's obvious. I'll put the ayah in Arabic and then I'll put the meaning, and I don't say which means. And some of them, they insist to do it for the hadiths too. And it's even less urgent to do it for the hadiths because you know that it's permissible to say the hadiths by meaning anyway. So for a hadith, I'll just put the meaning if I didn't want to put the Arabic, for example. This is permissible. And there's an example, like what Hassan ibn Thabit said. وقال الله قد أرسلت عبدا يقول الحق ليس به خفاء. He said, Allah said, I have sent a slave who says the truth that has no obscurity. So there's no ayah like that. And he means this ayah, إِنَّا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ شَاهِدًا وَمُبَشِّرًا وَنَذِيرًا. Indeed, we have sent you as a witness and a giver of glad tidings and a warner, O Muhammad. I've been looking for this for years now. I knew I took it. I couldn't remember where it was. And it's in a footnote. That's probably why I didn't find it when I looked for it. وَأَمَّا الْحَدِيثُ الْقُدْسِي. As for the holy hadiths, means the ones that in which the Prophet said, Allah said, فَيَجُوزُ رِوَايَتُهُ بِالْمَعْنَى. It's permissible to narrate those by meaning also. وَالْفَرْقُ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ الْقُرْآنِ أَنَّ الْقُرْآنَ يُتَعَبَّدُ بِتِلَاوَتِهِ. And the difference between the holy hadith and the Qur'an is that the reciting the Qur'an, the Qur'anic recital is worship itself. لو لم يقرأه الشخص لللفظ لو لم يقرأه الشخص للحفظ أو لتعليم الناس. Yani, a person gets reward for reciting the Quran even if he wasn't reciting it to memorize it, and even if he wasn't reciting it to teach it to the people. أما الحديث القدسي. As for the holy hadith, إذا لم يكن لذلك لا يتعبد به. If it weren't for reciting it from memory or reciting it, yani, if it weren't for reciting it to memorize it or reciting it to teach the people, then it's not a worship just to recite it. وقد روى ابن حبان والحاكم والبيهقي أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال. And Ibn Hibban and Al-Hakim and Al-Bayhaqi narrated that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, ستة لعنتهم ولعنهم الله وكل نبي مجاب. There are 6 whom I damn, and God damns, and every prophet with an answered dua damns. وَعَدَّ مِنْهُمُ الزَّائِدَ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. And one of those 6 that he counted is the one who adds something to the book of God. وَالزِّيَادَةُ أَنْوَاعٍ. And adding something to God's book is of different kinds, different cases. منها أن يزيد الشخص بنية أن يوهم الناس أن هذا قرآن وهو ليس من القرآن إجماعا. Amongst those is for someone, is for a person to add something to the Quran with the intention to give the people the impression that what he is adding is Quran, while it is not Quran by consensus. فَهَذَا أَشَدُّهُمْ إِثْمًا. This one is the most sinful of those who add to the book of God. فَمَنْ زَادَ فِي الْقُرْآنِ شَيْئًا أَجْمَعَ عَلَى أَنَّهُ أُجْمِعَ عَلَى أَنَّهُ لَيْسَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. So anyone who adds to the Quran something when there is an agreement that it is not from the Quran, فَقَدْ كَفَرَ. Then he has blasphemed. والثاني, the second, هو من يزيد حرفا من أجل تحسين الصوت, is someone who adds a letter for the sake of beautifying the sound, عمدا, deliberately, ليس على اعتقاد أنه من القرآن, without the conviction that it is part of the Quran, this edition of his. فهذا أقل إثما, this one is not as sinful, وهو من جملة عصاة المسلمين, and he is amongst the sinful Muslims, means he did not blaspheme. والثالث هو الذي يزيد حرفا من دون تعمد, the third is someone adding a letter unintentionally, إنما جهلا منه بالتلاوة, rather out of ignorance on his part about the way of the recitation. التي أنزلت على النبي, the recitation that was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فهذا أقل إثما من الأولين, this one is even less sinful than the first two. كمن يولد حرفا بين الهمزة والنون المشددة, like for someone to produce a letter between the hamza and the noon with a shadda. فيقول إنا بدل إنا, and then he would say inna instead of inna. Now, if you don't have an ear for the Arabic, maybe you didn't even see what happened there. But here, there's a ya here between the hamza and the noon. This ya would then make way for an extension, so it would become inna. And this one doesn't have any ya, so you just say inna. وكذلك ما يفعله بعض العجم, and likewise what some non-Arabs do, من زيادة واو أمام حرف الغنة, which is that they add a wow before the غنة letter. غنة is the sound that comes out of your nose, like when you say إنا لما قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس. That sound that comes from the nose is called غنة. He said, like what some of the non-Arabs do, the Ajam, of adding a wow before the غنة letter, إذا سبقته ضمة, if there were a ضمة before that غنة letter. Yeah. يقولون, they say ما هن ما هن ما هن. We're supposed to be ما هن ما هن, not ما هن. لأنه ليس من لغتهم غنة, because there's no غنة in their language. وإنما هي من خصائص لغة العرب, rather the غنة is special to the language of the Arabs. وكذلك يزيدون ألفا جوفية, and likewise they add an alif. ويقال لها الألف اللينة. ألف اللينة بين الحرف الذي قبل النون المشددة وبين النون. Yeah, and likewise they would add an alif between the letter before the noon with a shadda. No, they would add an alif between the letter that's before the noon with a shadda and the noon itself. يقولون أن لهم النار أن لهم النار instead of أن they say أن لهم النار وكل هذا حرام and all of this is forbidden. وأما الإخلال بالترقيق والتفخيم وسائر المدود سوى المد الطبيعي, and as for not reciting the light letter lightly or the thick letter thickly and the extensions other than the natural extension وَنَحْوِ ذَلِكَ and the likes of that. If you know some of the rules of tajweed, then you know what that means. فَلَا يَأْثَمُ مَنْ أَخَلَّ بِهِ فِي حَالِ الْقِرَاءَةِ. The one who does not produce these subtleties, these nuances, if you want, does not sin while reciting. لأن في إيجاب ذلك لكل قارئ حرج, because making those fine subtleties of the recitation obligatory on anyone and everyone who recites the Quran is a burden. Meaning, it's possible to read the Quran as standard Arabic is read. So standard Arabic is not going to have the special tajweed rules. But if you read the Quran as standard Arabic is read, then that means you're not saying incorrect Arabic, so you won't be sinful. وقول بعض بوجوب مراعاة كل ما أجمع عليه القراء من مد وقصر وترقيق وتفخيم وإظهار ونحو ذلك فهو غير الصحيح. And what some said, that what is obligatory is to observe everything that all reciters agree upon. Meaning, you know, the Quran has more than one mode of recitation. So some recitations have features that other recitations don't have. And all of those came from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This doesn't mean Quran has different versions. It's not like the Bible that has different versions. Rather, the Quran itself is made of various recitations. The Quran is not one recitation. It is various recitations. And so to be various recitations means there's differences between this recitation and that one. But there are still things that are common between all recitations. And what some said is that it's obligatory to observe what is common in all recitations. What all reciters agree upon. That means common amongst all recitations. Min maddin wa qasrin wa tarqiqin wa tafkhim, such as extending beyond the natural extension, or just extending a natural extension, and lightening a light letter, and thickening a thick letter, and producing a noon clearly or a meme clearly, وَنَحْوِ ذَلِكَ, and the likes of that. فَهُوَ غَيْرُ الصَّحِيحِ. This is incorrect. لأنه يؤدي إلى الحرج, because it still leads to the burden or the difficulty that we are avoiding. That we are avoiding by saying there's no sin in reading the Quran like standard Arabic is read. وَلَمْ يَجْعَلِ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ, and Allah Ta'ala did not put any burden in the religion. فلذلك لم يأخذ الشيخ زكريا الأنصاري بظاهر قول ابن الجزري. This is why Sheikh Zakaria al-Ansari did not take what appears from the statement of Ibn al-Jazari, the Imam of the Quran reciters, Ibn al-Jazari, the Quran scholar that no one who came after him reached his level. He wrote a tajweed poem, and Sheikh Zakaria al-Ansari explained it In fact, Sheikh Zakaria al-Ansari is a student of his. Wow, that's very amazing. Uh, Subhanallah wa bihamdi. So what did Ibn al-Jazari say that Sheikh Zakaria al-Ansari didn't take it as it appears? According to a copy, that is. According to a version of the poem of Ibn al-Jazari, he said, وَالْأَخْذُ بِالتَّجْوِيدِ حَتْمٌ لَازِمٌ مَنْ لَمْ يُجَوِّدِ الْقُرْآنَ آثِمٌ. And then in the footnote, they produced another, what's in another copy. Man lam yusahhihil Qur'ana athimu. This one is fine. So this line, according to the way it's worded, it means wal akhdhu bi tajweedi, taking by tajweed, practicing the rules of tajweed, the special nuanced rules of Quranic phonetics. Hatmun lazimu. It is mandatory and binding. Man lam yujawwidil Qur'ana athimu. Anyone who did not recite the Quran with tajweed rules is a sinner. So Sheikh Zakaria al-Ansari, he didn't confirm the judgment the way it appears to be from this line of poetry here. Anyone who doesn't recite the Quran with tajweed rules is a sinner? Not necessarily. Could be that he reads the Quran like standard Arabic is read without making any linguistic mistake, and therefore he won't be a sinner. And according to another copy of Ibn al-Jazari's poem, Man lam yusahhihil Qur'ana athimu. It means anyone who does not recite the Quran correctly is a sinner. Tambih, notice. مما يخالف الصواب عد بعض عد بعض في معاصي اللسان نسيان القرآن. Yeah, this hadith I was looking for. Amongst what is incorrect is how some people count as a sin of the tongue forgetting the Quran. ولو حرفا واحدا, even forgetting a single letter. So according to them, you memorized Juz Amma and then you forgot some of it, that's haram. But that's not correct, that's haram. Ba'da an hafizahu, after memorizing it, that one would be sinful for forgetting it after memorizing it. Wa kalamuhum hadha ghayru sahih. This talk of theirs is incorrect. وهذا يؤدي ببعض الناس إلى الخوف من حفظ القرآن. And this leads some people to be afraid to memorize the Quran. If they believe that this is really a sin, that's a deterrent from memorizing the Quran. لأن أكثر الناس ينسون, because most people forget. Even the scholar, even the one with the photographic memory, he could forget something of the Quran. The sheikhs, they did report about Sheikh Abdullah that from time to time he would look into a mushaf just to remember something. Yeah, we're talking about a man who has libraries in his heart where he can recall any book he wants to by heart from any chapter he wants. Still, from time to time, he'll look in the Quran to remember something. والحديث الذي يعتمدون عليه في ذلك غير الصحيح. And the hadith that they rely on for that is not an authentic one. وَهُوَ مَا رَوَاهُ أَبُو دَاوُود. It is what Abu Dawood narrated. عُرِضَتْ عَلَيَّ أُجُورُ أُمَّتِي حَتَّى الْقَذَاتُ يُخْرِجُهَا الرَّجُلُ مِنَ الْمَسْجِدِ. He said, according to this, and it's narrated by Abu Dawood, but it's not authentic hadith. The rewards of my nation are displayed to me, even the filth or the trash that a man takes out of the masjid. وَعُرِضَتْ عَلَيَّ ذُنُوبُ أُمَّتِي, and the sins of my nation were displayed to me. فَلَمْ أَرَ ذَنْبًا أَعْظَمَ مِنْ سُورَةٍ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ أو آية أوتيها رجل ثم نسيها. And I didn't see any sin greater than a surah of the Quran or an ayah that was given to a man that Allah bestowed upon him to memorize it, and then he forgot it. ومن الدليل على عدم صحة أنه يلزم الحرج على مقتضاه. And some of the evidence that this is not authentic is that the burden that we are avoiding would be binding according to this hadith. فإنه لا يخلو الحفظة للقرآن غالبا من نسيان شيء منه. Because the memorizers of the Quran usually are going there is not memorizers of the Quran usually who don't forget something. Wallahu lam yaj'al fi dini min haraj, and Allah did not put a burden in the religion. وَقَدْ أَبْعَدَ بَعْضُ الْمُتَأَخِّرِينَ مِنَ الشَّافِعِيَّةِ فِي الشُّذُوذِ فقال. And some latter-day Shafi'is have gone even further into irregularity, and thus said, فقال يدخل في معصية نسيانه بمجرد النقصان عن الحال التي كان عليها في الحفظ. That one said, one enters into the sin of forgetfulness by merely being less active than he was when it comes to memorizing. وَهَذَا ضَلَالٌ وَكُفْرٌ. Shaykh said, this is misguidance and blasphemy. Inshallah, add this to the outstanding reference. So I want to track all the cases that the Shaykh said is blasphemy. And all the cases that the Shaykh said is ijma'. And also some other cases. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. And refuge with God is sought.